Okay, I'm resuming this second hearing. The second case we have on the calendar is the state of Georgia versus Marcus Clark for warrant number 2022 CW 55658 for the charge of armed robbery. We have a second charge for warrant number 2022 CW 55659 for the charge of aggravated assault. Those are the two charges pending against Mr. Clark. The state is represented by ADA Cheryl Freeman, and the defendant is represented by attorney Tiffany Clark. Tiffany Pleasant. The defendant, Mr. Clark, is appearing live via Zoom at the Clayton County Jail. Is the state ready to call their first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. State calls Detective Marco Cooper. Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear and affirm that testimony about to provide in the matter of state of Georgia versus Marcus Clark will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Please tell us your name and how you're employed.
Detective Marco Cooper, employed with the Clayton County Police Department.
And sir, how long have you worked with the Clayton County Police Department?
For 7 years.
And sir, while working with the Clayton County Police Department, were you assigned to investigate an armed robbery that occurred on August 24th of 2022?
Yes, I was.
Were you part of the officers who responded to 7437 Grayson Drive in Riverdale, Georgia?
No.
Okay. Did you get the case after the initial officers went to that location?
Yes.
Please tell us from your investigation what you learned in the beginning.
What I learned in the beginning is that a 13-year-old male named Kamari Parker was robbed of his iPhone. He stated that he went to the area of Grayson Drive, Scott Road 138 area, to hang out with a friend that he had known since school, elementary school. He said when he hung out with his friend, he was lured to an abandoned property off of Grayson Drive when another male had came in and struck him from behind and stole his cell phone.
And Detective, the person that the victim, Kamari Parker, went to meet, did he give you a name of that person?
Yes. That was Quantrell Nunelli.
Was he able to give you the name of the person he said that struck him from behind?
Yes, Marcus Clark.
Was he able to give you a description of Mr. Clark?
Yes.
And what was that description, if you can recall?
The description he gave me was black male with dreadlocks. He stated that Marcus lived in the area. Some of his family members had known Marcus from high school as well.
Were you able to locate Mr. Clark?
Yes.
And was Mr. Clark found with Mr. Parker's phone?
That I do not remember.
Okay.
On my end, no. He was located in Clayton County Jail when I received the police report.
Do you know if Mr. Parker's phone was ever recovered?
No.
Were you able to interview Mr. Clark about the allegations?
I'm sorry, ma'am?
Were you able to interview Mr. Clark about the allegations?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
What did Mr. Clark state?
He denied the allegations. He did not know the victim.
Were you able to interview the first person, Quantrell, who was also there?
Yes, I was.
And what did Mr. Quantrell tell you?
Mr. Quantrell say that he was wearing blue latex gloves because in the police report, and according to the victim, there were several people wearing blue latex gloves walking in the area. He stated that he did go into this abandoned property for exploring with the victim, Mr. Parker. He stated that, well, he didn't point out Mr. Clark directly to my investigation. However, the initial statements and initial incident report, he did lead officers to Mr. Clark, whose house is directly across from the incident location on 7437 Grayson Drive. People in the neighborhood knew Mr. Clark as a well-known armed robber, is what they were saying.
Detective, were you able to locate any other witnesses to this incident?
No. Well, I interviewed a neighbor, but as far as a particular incident, no, ma'am.
Were you able to locate any video surveillance or camera from this incident?
No, ma'am.
I just did get a tip after I hung up with you from a guy named John Dickey, who said yesterday at 1 p.m.
You stated earlier that Mr. Parker said that the second individual struck her from behind. Would that second individual be Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Said he was by himself.
Who was the person he indicated who took his phone?
Mr. Clark.
Did he know what he was struck with?
He believes it was a firearm. Because he did see a handgun. He believes it was a firearm.
Alejandro didn't have any money, so they put a battery in the car.
The victim did have visible injuries and was also seen by the emergency room for those injuries of swelling on the face.
Situation, on the phone, and she goes, "Oh, I just saw this."
Did Mr. Parker state whether or not Mr. Clark made any statements to him when he struck him and took his phone?
Yes, he said Mr. Clark stated give it up.
Yes, he's by himself. I wanted to clear that up, that somebody didn't abduct him, but everything is leading that. Yes,
Do you know if Mr. Clark had a firearm when he was apprehended?
Yes, he did.
He is tracking to New York.
Was the victim able to identify that firearm as the same one that was used?
No, ma'am.
Queens Mountain, North Carolina.
I believe that firearm was related to another robbery case in the area.
He was at the Welcome Center. North Carolina Welcome Center on I-80.
All of this happened in Clayton County?
Yes, ma'am, it did.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Sent that information to me.
Any
I'm
pleasure, your witness.
trying to work those spot lead right now.
Detective, what is the description given by the alleged victim in this case of the individual that you're alleging struck him?
The description was given in a black male with dreadlocks. I believe he said the suspect was wearing gloves as well. I do not recall.
Any description involving height or weight?
Let me check. No, but he did state that he knew the victims from the first name and could not advise the last. Knew the suspect from the first name,
Okay.
not the last name.
But my question was, any description involving height or weight?
No.
Okay. And you testified that Mr. Nunnally led you to Mr. Clark. What does that mean?
Yes, Mr. Nelly led officers on scene to Mr. Clark. The mother of the victim actually went back. They know Mr. Nelly
Okay.
since the military school.
Detective, if you could answer my question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm asking about Mr. Nunnally.
Yes.
When you said that Mr. Nunnally led the officers to Mr. Clark, what does that mean? I'm not asking about the mother of the alleged victim. I'm asking about Mr. Nunnally.
Yes, ma'am, of course. They actually showed the officers where Mr. Clark lives at.
They in reference to Mr. Nunnally?
Yes.
And what did Mr. Nunnally say with regards to where Mr. Clark lived?
He lived at this residence. He just they pointed the residence from my understanding from the police report. And
How is that relevant to this case?
it's relevant to the case because for one, the victim knew Marcus by the first name.
Okay, Detective. Nunnally, how does Nunnally provide the information? How do we get to Mr. Nunnally saying this is Mr. Clark's house?
Well, the mother of the victim.
Nunnally. I'm asking about Nunnally.
Yes, ma'am. I'm trying to get to that. The mother of the victim went to Nunnally's house with her son, Mr. Parker. because they all know each other. And when confronted about the situation, not only said, no, that was Marcus. Marcus lives right here. That is where it came about.
So is your testimony that Nunnally confesses to the mother of the alleged victim, that
Yes,
he knows who allegedly committed this crime?
yes.
Did Nunnally provide any other information with regards to how he's claiming to know who committed this crime?
After an interview, yes, he did. He stated that the male walked into the abandoned property and struck him. Mr. Nunnally knows Marcus from the neighborhood. That's the most information we get. Everybody knows each other from the neighborhood.
Did Nunnally say that he saw Marcus Clark commit these crimes?
No,
Did he identify him in any way as participating in this crime?
no,
Did Mr. Parker identify Marcus Clark as the individual who allegedly committed this crime?
yes.
What specifically did Mr. Parker say that Mr. Clark is alleged to have done?
The victim stated that Mr. Clark allegedly struck him in the back of the head after entering the residence, the abandoned property, as to give it up, stated give it up, and demanded his cell phone from him. And they proceeded to run away in the same direction as Nunnally.
Has Mr. Parker, did you do a lineup in this case?
I was unable to do a lineup. They did not want you to participate in lineup.
Mr. Parker?
Yes,
So the alleged victim of an alleged armed robbery didn't want to participate in picking out the person who allegedly robbed him.
that is correct, ma'am.
So as it stands right now, you don't have a positive identification on the alleged armed robber.
With the lineup, no, ma'am.
Was Mr. Parker shown an individual photograph of Mr. Clark?
No.
Other than actually using Marcus Clark's name, do you have any positive identification other than my client's name being used in this case?
From neighbors, yes.
Did the neighbors observe the alleged armed robbery?
The neighbors observed him fleeing from the area during the crime. The neighbors all stated that he is a known robber.
Detective, my question was, do you have, I'm not asking about alleged reputation. I'm asking if
ma'am.
there's any positive identification, anyone observing the actual alleged crime.
No, ma'am.
And how many neighbors are you referencing when you're saying that they saw him fleeing? How many people?
From my investigation, it was one neighbor that wanted to participate and describe the events, but no one has actually seen the actual armed robbery takedown in that
So
abandoned house.
when you're saying neighbors, you're referring to one person? Did you
One
speak to more than
person.
one person?
Well, there's one person that was across the street in the neighborhood who had information. However, as far as what you're asking, is that they observed this or anything like that? That's no. But altogether, it's two people.
The one person that you're alleging observed him in the area.
Correct.
And what specifically did the one person who observed him in the area allege that they saw?
They observed him, seen him running away. They have seen past incidents of.
Detective Cooper, if you could just answer the question that I'm actually asking, please.
They observed him fleeing from
Asking
the area.
specifically what they're alleging that they observed on the date of the incident that you're testifying about, not about reputations or anything else. What
Yes, ma'am.
are they alleging that they observed him, the neighbor What are they saying they saw?
They saw Marcus run from the area.
Did they give a description of anything else about him?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Did they allege that they saw him with anything?
Not to my recollection, no.
So no one is saying that they saw him with the handgun.
No, not for this particular. No,
No one is saying they saw him with the cell phone.
correct.
Thank you. That's all I have.
8A Freeman, do you have any redirect?
Yes, just briefly, I just want to make sure we're clear on the identification of Mr. Clark. Detective Cooper, when you interviewed the victim, Mr. Parker, was he able to identify Mr. Clark as Marcus Clark?
Yes.
He referred to him by his name?
He referred by his first name to officers.
Did Mr. Parker indicate that he was familiar with Marcus?
Yes.
How did he indicate he was familiar with Marcus?
According to his mother, his brother, his older brother went to school with Marcus. So as soon as the name was Marcus was mentioned by Nunelli, they automatically knew who he was.
That's all I have, Judge. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any other witnesses? 8A Freeman?
No, Your Honor, the state rests.
Attorney Pleasant, do you have any witnesses for the defense?
Your Honor, just argument.
Okay, we're ready for arguments. 8A Freeman?
Thank you. The state waives opening.
Okay, Attorney Pleasant?
Your Honor, there is no photographic lineup conducted for reasons unknown. We have an alleged victim who doesn't want to positively identify the person who he's saying struck him with a gun and took his cell phone. There is no positive identification with regards to Mr. Clark from the alleged victim or from the alleged co-defendant. So based upon that, I would ask that these charges be dismissed against my client.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Pleasant. 8A Freeman?
Thank you, Judge. Based on the testimony from Detective Cooper, the victim in this case was able to identify Mr. Clark as the person who struck him with what he thought was a gun, took his iPhone. There was a neighbor who also saw Mr. Clark fleeing from the area. This was, I think, a vacant home that was across the street or near the residence of Mr. Clark. So, Judge, given we believe that the evidence that was submitted by Detective Cooper certainly meets probable cause, and so we would ask that both of the charges be bound over to Superior Court.
Based upon the evidence and testimony presented by the parties, I do find sufficient probable cause to bind over both charges against Mr. Clark to the Superior Court of Clayton County, specifically for the charge of armed robbery and aggravated assault. That will be the order of the court today, and that will conclude the preliminary hearing for Marcus Clark. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.